Alrighty, well, maybe let's get going because it's like 5 minutes past. If you're all right to stop the music. Thanks. Awesome. Alrighty, well, hi everyone. Welcome to the third workshop. I'm just going to go through the usual housekeeping-y things. So yeah, just make sure that you're on mute. Feel free to have your camera off or on. It doesn't matter, but we are recording the session. So if you don't want to appear on YouTube, then feel free to turn off your camera. You can put your pronouns in your Zoom name if you like. And Ryan is going to be the tech support person for the workshop. So you can private message him with any issues that you've got. And if you've got any questions or comments, then feel free to put them in the chat and we'll kind of get to them. There's not lots of people, and I think we'll probably have quite a relaxed schedule. So yeah, feel free to put in anything you want to chat about in the chat. Yeah, we'll go to the next slide. Cool, so this is just a breakdown of what we're going to talk about in this third workshop. So the structure for these workshops has been around zones in permaculture. So in the first workshop, we were looking at zone 0 and the self. In the second workshop, we kind of went out a little bit to maybe like zones 2 and 3, and we're looking at our kind of immediate neighborhood community connections that we can make sort of like close to us. And so this final workshop is going out more towards maybe zones like 4 and 5. So looking at things on a more global level. So first of all, I wanted to look a bit at the kinds of systems that we inherit, the world that we currently are living in, and sort of having a little look at what we're dealing with at the moment. And then have a bit of a discussion around decolonizing activism. So looking at how we can make our activism more inclusive, super, super important. Then we're going to have a break and then have a little look at what we can learn from indigenous direct action, because there's a lot of different protests and sort of direct action things happening coming from the indigenous communities, and we can learn a lot from them. And then looking at and having a chat around how we can build solidarity with more global struggles, and then a Q&A and how to keep connected and stuff. So that's what we're going to be covering today. Do you want to go to the next slide? So we're going to dive right in to some systemic oppression. So if, yeah, Ryan, do you want to click so the slide stuff comes up? Great. So basically, this is just sort of looking at what systems we have inherited, the world that we currently live in sort of our Western culture. Is very heavily influenced by colonialism, white supremacy, patriarchy. These are kinds of like the systems that we have inherited in the world that we live in now, and that kind of influences everything that we are doing, even if we're trying to do something really great like activism in whatever field we're doing it in. We will have inherited all of these different systems through no fault of our own, because we live in that kind of world. So it's really important. You can't solve a problem until you know it's there, until you acknowledge that it exists. So the very first step we have to do is to acknowledge that this is what the system is that we live in. Yeah, the next point. So we need to look at how we're affected by, or how do we benefit from these systems. And it can be quite difficult. It's like pretty challenging work, especially if we're people who benefit from the systems. So it's really important that we take the time to look at that for ourselves. Yeah, right, the next point. So if we don't design our systems, we inherit them. I think we covered this a little bit in the previous workshop where we were talking about various different systems for our community groups. This idea that we have systems of how we communicate, how we make decisions, all that kind of stuff inherently already happening. And if we don't make explicit choices about designing the systems that we want, we're going to end up reproducing the ones that we inherit. And that is what leads to us repeating and reproducing the systems that we live in. So we want to try and make sure that we are designing systems that can counteract this stuff. So this book here that this quote is from, Thrive, is a really, really great facilitators book. And there's a section in it around this, and the quote there, privilege tends to create cultural blindness. I just think it's really, really important because it just shows us that we can't always see the ways that we benefit, especially with privilege. It can basically be quite difficult to tell that you're actually benefiting from something. So it's important that we try and put in a lot of effort to look and see where we are benefiting from the systems. So on the next slide is this exercise that was in the Thrive book. So this is basically, we're not going to do it now, but this is just a kind of an idea for something that you could do, and we'll send the slides out. So you'll have this list of things that you'll be able to go through later whenever you like. And so it's basically just a list, an inventory of all different attributes. Oh, sorry, there's someone who's not on mute. Oh, cool, thank you. Yeah, so it's just a list of categories to go through that you can fill out to start to see where you might have privilege or where you might be not benefiting from the systems that we have. And it's just a way of kind of maybe shining a light on some things, sort of maybe clearing up a bit of the cultural blindness. So it's a really interesting and useful exercise to do, just to start with yourself, to just raise some awareness. When it's all listed out like that, it can be quite enlightening. So that's just a kind of suggestion for something that can be interesting to do in groups that you're in, just to kind of do a little bit of an inventory to see where your privilege lies. So in the next slide. Yeah, so having done that and sort of raised some awareness around those issues, we can then start to look at how we can start to work on decolonizing activism. So it's often people who are the most privileged in our society, so namely like people from white middle class backgrounds, that get given platforms as activists and are in the media, are speakers, are organizers at events and actions and things like that. And because of that, we end up seeing a very narrow view and focusing on very narrow issues because only a certain group of people are being platformed. So what we want to try and do is mitigate for that. So if you can click and get the next points up. Yeah, so decolonizing activism means centering the experiences of those who are most marginalized. And what we want to try and do is highlight the issues of people, especially to do with the climate crisis, this specifically what we're talking about, from people who are from indigenous and global south spaces, because they are the people who are going to be most affected by what's happening most quickly. So we want to make sure that we are highlighting those issues. And then the next bit. So it's really important that we can understand systems of oppression, how they overlap and intersect, and that gives us a much fuller picture of injustices such as the climate crisis. There's lots of different things going on, and it's really important that the activism that we're doing, the things that we're working on and promoting, are taking into account the experiences of marginalized people. So if we can have the next slide. So XR has been pretty heavily criticized, basically for being quite white and middle class as a movement, and for excluding marginalized people. So we know a couple of organizations that have been set up to kind of help counteract that. So XR Unify is a group that are working with the Justice Steering Group for XR, who are kind of looking into intersectionality within that movement and figuring out how to create actions and hold meetings that are prioritizing vulnerable and excluded people in our society. So people such as disabled people, working class people, queer people, people of color, making sure that those voices are being not just heard, but are being centered and prioritized. And another group that was set up by someone who's a co-director of Wild Horizons is the Anti-Oppression Circle. And so this is like a kind of sharing circle and talking group that was set up by people of color in the UK and beyond, so that they can talk openly about injustice and what they experience when they're working in activist spaces, and to kind of help form a mutual support network. So those are just like two examples of things that are happening to kind of try and work towards decolonizing activism. So the next slide is a breakout. So what we're going to do is just start to have a conversation, really. I think it would just be really great to get a chat going. I think hopefully Ryan is sorting out putting people into breakout rooms. So a couple of things that we can start to look at, like what are the issues that people have experienced or know are happening with within activist spaces, and what are possible solutions, what are ways that we can start to make it better, basically. So we're going to have 10 minutes, I think, to start chatting about that. Ryan, if you can give me a signal that the breakout rooms are ready. Oh, look, great, ready to go. Cool. So let's go to breakout rooms, and yeah, we'll come back after about 10 minutes and we'll like kind of harvest from the groups in the main space to see what we've all come up with. So let's go to the breakouts then.
Recording in
Hi, welcome back, gang. Sorry, Ivy, we got cut off, but I really liked what you were saying. So when we do the harvest bit next, if you like, you could definitely share. That was really great. So yeah, hopefully that was useful and interesting chat. I really enjoyed hearing from the people in the group I was in. So Ryan, are you there? Oh yes, you are. Great. Okay, so Ryan's gonna kind of just get some feedback and some thoughts. We've got maybe, I think, about 10 minutes before we're gonna go for our break. Yeah, so feel free to write in the chat where I can copy and paste that, but also like unmute and shout out. There's not very many of us, so I think it's fine to just kind of call out. But if you're feeling polite and you want to put up your Zoom hand, then you can, and I will call on you. So what came up for people in their groups? Anything anyone wants to share? Ivy, go for it.
I don't want to overspeak, but we had a person of color from another country in our chat, and they said that it's hard to get people to want to be activists when they're just trying to get by. They're just trying to make a living the way they know how, and they don't know how else to do it.
Yeah, and, absolutely.
And another person said that he expressed that he wants to reach out, but he doesn't always know how. And then I shared what somebody had told me last week, is that the worst thing you can do is be too scared to try. And that you should reach out even if you're scared of being awkward. But you should try to be understanding, and the most important thing you can do is just show up and meet people. So
yeah, I feel like what came up was like this idea that society is really fragmented and it's quite difficult to make connections with people, and I feel like that's kind of where we are sort of going with the theme of this series of workshops, is building connections with people in this sort of ever expanding zones can kind of help us to see humanity and the humanity in people, and that is something that just really connects all of us. So yeah, I like that. Don't be afraid to try. Anybody else from like the other breakout group want to share anything?
It was mentioned in our group that we need to be aware of and work to fight against the hugely different policing approaches towards people of different backgrounds, and how people's ability to get involved in protest and direct action. And hearing some of the stories from the US sound absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, when like when tactics are very much around getting arrested and recognizing whether that's possible for people or not for various different reasons. So that's a really good point, and one reason why we need to be protesting the police crime court sentencing bill that's happening in the UK right now. Kill the bill. Right, Matt, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Em. Yeah, just wanted to pick up on something that was raised in the presentation about decolonizing the mind. So we touched on it in our discussion group about, everyone is very sort of entrenched in their background and the systems that they've been brought up with and basically learnt to live among. I think each of us on a personal level has a role to play in reevaluating that and thinking about those systems that, as you say, kind of direct us, and doing what we can to reflect on the good and the bad about that, and trying to let that influence and direct our actions. So you think about, where we, procure food from, or where we buy stuff from, or how we move around, things like that. And one thing that XR and our local group have been doing recently is sort of community talks, so crisis talks that XR were doing during the latest rebellion in the UK. Just getting out into the community and trying to discuss these kind of things with people and trying to listen, and make connections that way, and try and become more part of the community. I think that's the way that things like this will grow, as you say, about different zones, different areas, sort of addressing and thinking about these things, and the whole topic becoming more of a discussed and appreciated phenomenon. So yeah, I think that's a sort of individual level and a community level role that we can look to develop, use the tools that we've got, like the technology we've got. Yeah, trying to sort of be active listeners and hearing what other people are sort of feeling and thinking, and maybe understand a bit better some of the barriers.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I like that active listening, and yeah, just like asking questions and going out and hearing what people want and need rather than going in and telling them. That's a very colonial kind of way of doing things. So like actively going out and hearing what people want and need is really important. Alex, you've got your Zoom hand up.
Yeah, so another thing that we talked about in our group is just like a little bit more about the term decolonize itself, and how like sometimes it could be kind of a loaded term, and like how like there's times where people overuse it when not actually like thinking critically or like acting upon the material realities of like a post-colonial world. And how like decolonizing is absolutely something that happens like mentally and internally, and happens through conversations, but also like we also need to be acting towards changing material realities and legacies of colonialism through things like land back, like climate debt, payments to the global south, like reparative measures like that.
Yeah, nice. So not just it being like a kind of an intellectual thing that you like do in your head, but also being something that is like happening in the real world, I guess. Yeah, that's super important. I imagine, especially in like North America, and I've spent some time in Canada. I'm going to talk a little bit about a project, so indigenous direct action happening in Canada, around like giving back land and things like that. Like that's like actual concrete things that can be done that can go quite a long way, probably a lot longer than us all sort of sitting around and navel gazing about how to make things better. So yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, and that's an excellent summary, right? Of that, translating ideology into actuality. That's really great. Right, I think has anybody else got any last bit that they want to like put out there? I think before we go, we're going to go to the break in like a couple of minutes. But has anyone else got? I'm happy with how many like positive things we came up with. We kind of didn't really get to that so much in our group, but it's great. People have shared quite a lot of ideas of what we can do to make it better, which is always very positive. So yeah, any last points that anyone wants to make? Yeah, Diego.
Yeah. The last.
Oh, are you still there? You're a bit glitchy.
It's not so good.
That's okay. Keep trying though, because you came back there for a second.
Yeah, I was thinking on the colonization of economics, I don't know, there's a problem in have the whole world in the same economic system, and if some of that those economical systems needs to change in other local economies or something that really works for the global south. I was thinking on that, but that's I wanted to say.
Yeah, great. No, you definitely, like, we talked a bit, or you mentioned that a bit in our breakout room around how, yeah, things are complicated, and the economic system that we are currently in is definitely not conducive to change for the better, that's for sure. Cool. Okay, so I think if you've got that point down, Ryan, yeah, exploring alternative economics, awesome, we love that. Okay, Matt, have you got your, is that a new Zoom hand?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's
go
a
for
new
it.
hand. Sorry, just a quick one to add on. There was a really good speaker at the closing ceremony of the rebellion in London a month or so ago now. They was talking about the school system. I can't remember the name of the group, but was talking about reviewing the way we get taught in schools. And you know, I remember about having quite a selective sort of teaching of historical subjects. You know, things like, you know, British colonialism and the sort of savage actions that the sort of British took in their colonies and around the world was barely mentioned at all. So we don't get that information taught to us, and it's kind of dressed up in a very sort of heroic victor, like we're sort of ruling power. And I think that's important to reflect on, and perhaps does need reassessing in schools, because we're just not, in this country at least, not getting given that information, and we're being brought up to think and believe things are a certain way, and not actually understanding what's actually happened and what the truth is.
Yeah, definitely. I have a degree in history and I didn't learn anything about British colonial project ever. So I think it's definitely like a massive gap. And there's a really great project, I'll look it up in the break, in the UK about decolonizing the curriculum and teaching Black history as British history, because it is British history. And I'll put it in the chat when I find it. I follow them on Instagram and they're really, really great. Great. Okay. So I think we're going to go for our break now. Is that what's happening on the next slide? So I think we've got that brilliant list of stuff. Yeah, 10-minute break. So feel free to go grab a cup of tea, get off the screen. We'll play some nice music, and then yeah, come back in 10 minutes, which will be 1853, something like that. And yeah, we'll get on to the next part of the workshop. Hey everyone, I think that's 10 minutes. So I'm assuming that everyone is back. There's no videos on, so hopefully you're all back. There's someone. Great. Hi, Ivy. Cool. Okay, well then let's keep going with the next bit. Yeah, so I just wanted to take a little bit of time to have a think about Indigenous direct action and the kinds of things that we can learn from all of the many different movements that are happening at the moment. This quote, I feel really bad because I can't remember where I found it, but it was in a book that was about Indigenous direct action that I found online. I think it was a free ebook, and then I've lost the link for it, I'm afraid. But basically, I just thought that this was a really interesting sort of thing to think about, this idea of spirituality being an extremely powerful tool for Indigenous resistance and direct action. So this idea that, you know, lots of different types of tactics, so things like drumming, smudging, song, ceremony, are not often seen as legitimate direct action tactics by white people, but that they are and always have been fundamental to success of movements fighting for Indigenous sovereignty. And so Amanda Lickers, I just wanted to say that she didn't say this quote she's the writer of the book. It didn't say the name of the person who was speaking, but she was writing about her experiences at Unistoten camp, which is in British Columbia, and is one of the examples that I'm gonna mention. So I just thought that was a really interesting point that was worth mentioning. So these are two examples of Indigenous direct action that I guess I have some kind of tenuously personal link to. Zapatistas, I buy Zapatista coffee, and I find the movement really, really interesting. So basically, the Zapatista Army of National Liberation declared war on the Federal Army in Mexico, demanding land, work, shelter, food, health, education, freedom, independence, basically all of this stuff for Indigenous people in Mexico, and took control of land that is producing coffee. And they now grow, sell, and export coffee completely themselves. So they've basically reclaimed land that was taken and was being used for profit by non-indigenous people and have basically taken back control of like huge amounts of land in Mexico. And yeah, are just a really interesting and inspiring group that have been doing that work for a really long time. The Una Stoughton camp is near where I have spent some time in Canada quite a long time ago now, and is basically a protest camp that was built to stop a pipeline from being built in northern BC. And they have been there for a long time now. I'm not sure exactly how long, but I was there like 5 or 6 years ago, and it had been set up for quite a long time before that. And when I was there, they were building the healing center that is mentioned on the slide. And this is basically because the pipeline was being built through traditional territory of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation people, and they obviously don't want it going through there. There's a really big water table area, the Skeena water table, and they basically were really concerned about the pipeline leaking and destroying the water. Salmon is a really big sort of food staple and source of income for people who live there, and so their main priority was to basically protect the water and to stop the pipeline. So they built a camp and the healing center there. Yeah, it's really amazing. I met a lot of people who were working on the building, who were going to help hold the checkpoints and things like that they set up. I think last year the RMCP, the Royal Mounted Canadian Police, went in and arrested a lot of people and tried to clear out the camp, and there was a big kind of uprising of support for people within Canada for that movement. And then the pandemic happened, and it became really difficult for people to go out and protest what was being done. So a lot of people, it's ongoing though. Yeah, they're still there, and definitely still fighting the good fight of stopping resource extraction in Canada, which is relentless. So it's definitely not the only one. There's lots of different ones, but this is just one that I know of personally. So yeah, definitely worth looking into what they're doing there. So if we go to the next slide, right? Yeah, so what can we learn? We came up with a few ideas and thoughts that were things that just kind of occurred to us while we were looking into these movements and doing some research for this. So I thought that I would just share a couple of thoughts that we had, but if anyone has got anything else that they want to share, or any thoughts, the things that they know from their knowledge and experience of Indigenous direct action, then be great to hear your thoughts. So just feel free to type some stuff in the chat if you like. So yeah, I guess based on or inspired by the quote that was on the previous slide, the idea of ritual being a really powerful and valid form of resistance, not just marching, not just sitting down, but actually a lot of ritual is super powerful. And yeah, I think that, oh cool, thanks Ivy. That's great. I think that that's something that perhaps we are maybe lacking a little bit in our lives in general. I know personally I feel that I could definitely have some more of that in my life. And then the next point was, oh, right, are you there? Yeah, direct action both builds and defends marginalized communities. So it's something that really brings people together and can really help defend and build the connections that communities need to help protect themselves. Something that I noticed and in sort of like learning about, especially Zapatistas. I think both of these slides have got background pictures of Zapatista women. And in looking at indigenous water protector kind of movements, that women and girls are often really centered and often lead struggles, which is something that I find really inspiring and really interesting, and is just really beautiful. It's amazing seeing the like young women often in like really beautiful native dress going to speak at like, you know, parliaments, or not parliaments, government places, institutions. It's often women and young girls who are really front and center of these struggles, and I think that's great and inspiring, and we should have more of that. And then this last point was around diversity of tactics. So something else that I saw was that there's lots of different things that indigenous groups are doing. They're not just relying on one thing. So they're not just relying on protests. They're not just relying on camps. They are using lots of different tactics to get the results they need. So yeah, kind of going to government sources and getting land and territory mapped and officially recognized is one tactic that then they can use to, for example, in rainforests, see where people are logging illegally, for example, and can really start to pinpoint which territories are being illegally logged and things like that. So yeah, diversity of tactics, basically just meaning that there's lots of different ways of getting either your point across or of sort of tackling an issue. There's lots of different avenues that you can take, and that in most cases, diversity of tactics is something that can improve the chances of your movement being successful. If you're not just relying on lobbying the government, for example, but that you also back that up by building something on the land that can stop people like the police coming through, then you've got two different, one may be more direct, one may be a little bit more official, then you have maybe more chance of success. So that's kind of what we mean by that. And yeah, that's a really lovely point, Ivy, around not separating between people, land, water, animals, all are sacred. I think that's definitely something that's maybe missing from kind of Western culture. We see ourselves as very separate from nature. And I think that colonialism is a big part of that idea of going to places and dominating them and extracting resources and things like that. So yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna hand over to Ryan now, who's gonna do some stuff around building solidarity. I just really quickly wanted to check before you start, right, Alex, you've got a Zoom hand. I can't remember, was that left over from before?
Oh yeah, sorry, that's leftover. I'll take
it. Oh, that's okay. I just suddenly noticed it and thought, oh no, if you had your hand up for ages and ages and I've not noticed. Cool. Okay, right, go for it.
Cool, thanks, Ems. Can you hear me all right? Nice one. Cool, yeah, so this next section is about building solidarity and moving from ally to accomplice. So I just found this quote, which I really liked, by Eduardo Galeano. I don't believe in charity, I believe in solidarity. Charity being vertical and going from the top to the bottom, solidarity being horizontal. It respects the other person, and I have a lot to learn from other people. I just thought that was really nice, and kind of, yeah, recognizing that charity is one tactic to solving problems, solidarity is another. And I just wanted to maybe kind of talk a little bit about what that might mean and just propose some strategies that seem to have some effect. So yeah, collaborate on issues of alignment. It could be many different ways to collaborate, like Em said, with the diversity of tactics. Might not be something that you initially think is your struggle. I know for myself, being of a working class background, I can relate to a lot of struggles, but some I can't instinctively. And so, yeah, just kind of recognizing that all these struggles are interrelated, and yeah, like wherever you feel there is an alignment in some way, shape or form, maybe it's like an ethical alignment that you feel that you relate with other groups and other projects on. That's a great time to collaborate and work together. Another point is to share your privilege and your power. We all have privilege and power in all different ways. Some of us are great at some things and really bad at others. Some of us are on top of the social pyramid, other people aren't. But I really like this idea of collaborating between these levels as well. So for example, if you're a landowner and you have tons of land, is there a way that you can share this with people who need it? We're seeing this happening a little bit in Wales at the moment. Some people are buying up land specifically to hold it for people who need it, and finding ways to regenerate and kind of spread that privilege and power away from just one person. And radical alternatives at every level. This is something I'm particularly passionate about. It's something that I feel like a lot of us can do. Just kind of being aware about what, if you're buying anything, like where does it come from? And are there radical alternatives or less evil alternatives to be able to meet your needs? I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a bit. And yeah, creating new ways of contributing to wider struggles. So like being creative really and figuring out, like, is there a way in which we can kind of create new sources of collaboration, and is there new ways which we can start to give people what they need in struggles and work together towards the same aims or similar aims. So I have a video and we were struggling with it before. So I'm going to try and play it, but let me know if it doesn't work and then I'll just talk through it instead. So let's give it a little go.
A sweatshop is modern day or postmodern day slavery.
People working in dreadful conditions, being paid, a pittance, if anything.
People are expected to work incredibly long hours.
Got people doing 18-hour days for no money.
Dangerous working conditions.
There's no human rights.
They use a lot of child labor.
Women, children, people that are easily exploitable.
Sexual violence, sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, and all of that kind of thing happens within the sweatshop industry as well.
The argument is basically that there's nothing else for people to do. They're the best jobs that people in developing countries can get, so we shouldn't regulate them. That is the basic tenet of neoclassical free market economics. Just leave private capital to do what it does and everything will be peachy. Now, I think that's clearly bollocks.
Don't be one of these people who's just like, yeah, but they're earning. Without the sweatshops, they'd be begging in the streets. It doesn't matter, the fact is you're exploiting these people, so don't exploit people.
Whatever corporate fluff some of these places, some of these companies trot out there to make it seem like they're responsible corporate citizens or whatever. I think the reality on the ground is it's a climate of fear and exploitation that these people work under.
You can't judge it in degrees. It makes no difference. It's the same system destroying people's lives.
This isn't really what we want.
We want to have something that's consistent with the values that we're talking about.
The only reason why working class people essentially have ever gotten a share of the pie is through fighting for it.
Places that are not only sweatshop free, but are union as well, so you know the labor's getting treated well.
We're down for the unions, aren't we?
I think unions are a really important source of power in terms of challenging the bosses. I think strikes are a massively important way of moving forward.
A decent minimum wage, regulation of hours, and really importantly, a recognition that workers have the right to organise.
Obviously, workers' co-ops are a massive step up from sweatshops because you can ensure that people are working for a living wage.
It doesn't take a sort of brain surgeon to sort of think that we all ought to have dignity. It's simple, really.
You know, I'm mixed race, my dad was a first-gen immigrant, and the punk scene is like one of the few places where I see people really caring about this kind of global, international solidarity.
Bands, pride themselves on being DIY, so doing everything themselves, but they've overlooked where they buy and source their t-shirts from.
You might have a punk band that's selling some t-shirt with some slogan about workers' rights, fuck the bosses, smash capitalism or something, and it's on a commercially produced t-shirt. It's a complete contradiction.
I think a key one for us is like that the majority of sweatshop workers are women, so can't really be in a feminist band and then like support the exploitation of women through the use of sweatshops.
It's just hypocrisy, isn't it? If on one hand I'm saying freedom and peace for people, and there's, some kid, working their little fingers, little jobs, sort of to make my trainers or whatever.
Absolutely, we are all hypocrites. Like, I don't think anyone's like totally perfect, but I think there are like quite simple things that we can do to like avoid pretty major hypocrisies.
And we're as guilty as lots of other bands.
Let's just blame ourselves. It's not all my fault, and it's not all the band's fault, and people, we're trying the best we can.
I mean, we're all upholding capitalism anyway. Like, the punk scene works as like its own little mini capitalist system, but then further supporting exploitation within that system is pretty bleak.
I opposed putting Holiday in Cambodia in a Levi's commercial, and my main reason for opposing that so vehemently is because of the sweatshop issue. It's an ongoing struggle because it all, to me, comes back to, can I live with myself if I know somebody making stuff that I'm getting money from or has my name on it? The people who make it are being treated absolutely horribly.
I guess in the punk scene, you can do your bit. Practice what you preach. You can make a difference. It ain't gonna take that much just to spend, a little bit more, get an ethically sound t-shirt, and be proud about it.
You can't look at everything in terms of financial expense. What's the expense in terms of sweatshop workers dying in a factory? If you've got to pay an extra £2 for a t-shirt, you pay that. I'd rather pay less than the price of a half pint in London and know that my t-shirt is actually going to help some people.
We have no alternative if we're free-thinking, good-thinking, clean-thinking people to act.
This punk ethics campaign is part of a bigger movement. In particular, Punk Ethics is working with No Sweat, which is an organisation that campaigns against sweatshops in general and is selling t-shirts from a cooperative owned and run by former sweatshop workers.
This project we love it because we want to make cool business. No one is slave in this world.
And the time has come to start to think about this and to start to try and change this. If more and more bands start to say, we're not going to put up with this, we're going to source our t-shirts ethically.
That's why it's important to get involved, not as a self-righteous thing or not as like an ethical consumer badge, but as trying to build and support a political movement.
So really the questions are all down to us, they're not down to what's wrong with the world. The questions are really what's wrong with me, and if you like, why aren't I doing anything about it?
This is what you're singing about. This is what all these bands are singing about. All the people that come to the gigs, they're singing along, shouting for this stuff. Time to put our money where our mouths are.
Those words, those immortal words, do they owe us a living? Well, do we owe sweatshop workers a living? Yeah, of course we fucking do.
Do I owe us a living? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Owe us a living. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Owe us a living. Yes, I
Yeah, so yeah, I just wanted to share that. Really like this idea of kind of, yeah, like every chain of events that you have when you're getting any product of any kind, you know, just like figuring out where that comes from at every level, like who makes your t-shirt, what the workers being treated like, what happens when it comes to the UK, for example, what happens then, who sells it then? Are you buying it from a corporation? Are you buying it from a cooperative? Who prints your t-shirt, for example? Like, yeah, like something that I've been doing recently is working with No Sweat to create t-shirts for the Myanmar solidarity campaign. And I came up with this little logo, the Solidarity Fund. Yeah, and this is just kind of like making sure that at every level, when it comes to at least t-shirt production in this case, we are kind of building solidarity at every single level and making sure that all of the money that is kept within the kind of people who we want to keep it within, really. This can spur a lot of conversations and help spark folks to think about solidarity. Great, I'm glad that that's the case. We can send you this as the link as well after the event. Yeah, share it around. It's just, again, it's just one thing. Like there's so many things we could do. This is just one example, something that I was aware of and have been involved in. Yeah. Nope. Okay, so we're going to go to a little kind of way of contributing now. I think Em's just going to put something in the chat, which is a link. This link will take you to a thing called Mentimeter, which means that you can type something and it will come up on the main screen. So yeah, if you could just pop that in the chat, Ems. Yeah, great. And so yeah, I just wanted to kind of explore this question. So like with the means that you have available, how can you bring solidarity with international struggles right now? How can you build solidarity? So yeah, again, like so many different ways to do it. I just shared something that I knew about, but I'd really like to hear what other people feel they have power to do. Yeah, and just kind of see what people can do and see where we can share these things. So I'm just going to go to the results page, and hopefully in a minute, if it all works, we'll start to see what people write. Yeah, so another example, which we didn't go into today, but we might do next time, is about the Zapatistas and the coffee system and how that can go through it. That goes through a chain of events from the Zapatistas to anarchists in Hamburg, which is roasted there and then sold to people in the UK and all around the world, all co-op led, basically. What have we got here? Sharing things through social media networks. Yeah, totally. Something we can all do at any time, really. That's unique power of our time. Anti-imperialist organizing and analysis. Translates into action. Okay. Yeah, nice. Ems, I'm gonna let you into this chat as well, if you wouldn't mind commenting on things also, if you have anything to share. Ah, local community energy. That's really interesting. I'm curious to hear more about that as well. Elevate indigenous and BIPOC speakers and have white activists listen to their demands. Yeah, for a change, that would be great. Nice. Is there anything else? Yeah, we call it BAME, and also people are saying BPOC over here right now, recognizing that maybe we don't really have indigenous people necessarily in the UK. Yeah, not for a long time at least. Help build a representative citizens assembly. Ah, cool. Yeah, I'd also love to hear any strategies around that. Whoever wrote that, that'd be interesting. How can we do that? Learn about the history of slavery and colonial extraction. Okay. Yeah, it's so much of that is hidden as well, isn't it? Like someone was saying earlier, you only know what you're taught at school, and so much of this information is censored. What's this one? Be aware of how your food, clothes, etc. is. I don't know why I can't go to that. Ah, here we go. It's produced and open to conversation with your social circle. Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's good just to bring this stuff up, you know, like a lot of the time this is so implicit. Years ago, I wouldn't have thought about t-shirts until I came across the sweatshop issue. And now, yeah, at least that's one thing that I feel like I do have control over. Yeah. Recognize your own indigenousness, own history. Yeah, we're in Wales at the moment, and there's quite a big move towards independence happening at the moment, and lots of people relearning Welsh language, and yeah, kind of like raising that awareness too. And it's getting kind of, there's a movement building for sure. Anything to get out of England, I think. Oh, cool. Okay, yes, so that's various things. That's great. Thanks for contributing there. Just going to go back to the main main discussion. Yeah, so rounding up, just wanted to have this quote from CrimeThink: to change everything, start anywhere. CrimeThink are an amazing collective, going for a long time, has been very influential on the kind of radical scene. Yeah, just recognizing that there's so many problems and we have to change everything, really. A good way to do that is just to start anywhere we can. We can also send you a link to the CrimeThink ex-workers collective in the follow-up email, because there's tons of free resources there too. Cool, I'll just pass it over to Ems then.
Great, thank you. That was super awesome. Thanks for showing us that video. I love it. It's really great. So yeah, I just wanted to give you guys these quick resources. So we've got like QR codes because we're really technologically advanced. So you can scan them if you have a smartphone. Or I'm putting the links in the chat. So we've got a Signal chat that we set up for this series of workshops. So Ivy, the links that you mentioned that you had, if you've got anything to share around the like Indigenous women-led movements, like that would be a really great place to put any stuff that you want to share to any projects that you are aware of and know about and think people will find interesting. And same goes to everyone else. If you've got anything that you want to share or conversations that you want to carry on around the stuff that we've been talking about in these workshops, then the Signal chat is a really great place for that. The Wild Horizons Telegram network is also a great place for sharing information about all kinds of interesting stuff. So you can join that, and we put things on there around workshops that we're doing, but also just kind of people can chat and get to know each other and hopefully build connections where we can start kind of developing the things that we've been talking about. And I've also put a link in the chat to our website as well, which you can check out. It's going to have links to the videos and to future workshops, and you can sign up to our mailing list and keep up to date and all of that fun stuff there. So if we go to the next slide, we've got maybe about 5 minutes to do like a super quick Q&A. Sorry, it's not that long, but if anyone's got a question or just anything that they just want to share, thoughts, whatever, then feel free to unmute and go for it, or write in the chat, whatever you prefer, if anyone's got anything they want to share. Oh, Matt, yeah.
Hi, thanks, Sims. Yeah, just touched at the start on the permaculture subject. I haven't been to any of the last seminars, so apologies if you covered this, but have you guys got somewhere in Wales at the moment where you're practicing some of this, or is this kind of like an ongoing thing you're developing?
We're working on it. But we don't have resources for accessing land currently, but we are sort of talking with another group about potentially being able to collaborate on land that they have. And so we're hoping that kind of this time next year, we'll be able to start doing some more land-based things and workshops in person. It was our plan for this year, but obviously with the pandemic and everything in person got kind of like pushed back. So we've done these like online ones, but yeah, in the future, our plan is to get land, grow things, show people how to do that. That's our plan. Ivy, you got a hand up.
I do. I hope I'm not taking too much space, but one thing that is really important is that a lot of the issues are connected by banks and investment firms, and that's something that a lot of us can strategize around protests at banks and carry the messaging, and that's a way to have solidarity with there's so many bad things that the banks are investing, and that's our money, because as customers they're taking the money that we put in our bank accounts. And so I know that XRUK has some organizing around this, but in the US it's ours is very intersectional, and it's called Stop the Money Pipeline. I can put the link into the chat, and it really is connecting the banks that are investing in things that we don't want, and trying to make them pull their investments. For example, the with solidarity with indigenous led movements for against oil pipelines. Those oil pipelines can't be built without the money that the banks are giving them. So that's our theory of change. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love this idea of cutting them off at the source, and and that it's also really important to know what people are doing with your money, and yeah, just like really looking into the supply chain and in everything, and yeah, definitely including like what your bank is up to. That's really awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So that kind of takes us up to 7:30. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we're gonna finish off now. So thank you so much for coming along and participating and being part of this last of this series. I'm really sad that I missed the last one, but kind of had COVID. I'm better now, so that's good. But yeah, we're basically going to have a break now for a month, and then in November we're going to do our last series of workshops that Ryan is going to be facilitating, and they're going to be around capitalism, technology and transition, which sounds super exciting. And so we'll be sharing about them on our social media and things like that. So in the meantime, feel free to connect with us on Telegram, the Signal group, join our mailing list. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So feel free to like unmute and say bye. And yeah, hopefully we will all manage to stay in touch.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to see you all.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, peace.
Cheers. Bye.
Nice one.
Great form too.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really great to meet people. So definitely join our groups, join our networks. And
we had a spy in the midst too.
Oh, you had a cat this whole time?
Nice.
He's with the feds. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, hi, kitty. Oh, well, that's just made my whole evening. Don't care about any of you guys. This guy had a cat. Oh dear.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Cool.
everyone.
See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Great job.